Hi there! Welcome to Becoming the Self-Led Woman podcast. My name is Monica, and this is a weekly podcast for modern women in which we will explore different topics such as self-leadership, personal growth, financial empowerment, feminine wisdom, all sorts of things that help us understand how can we navigate nowadays as a modern woman. You can think of it as a coffee chat that you can have with an older sister. So here I am as your older sister, that I am sharing honest, supportive, practical insights that can help you create the life that feels more aligned, more empowered, and really more heart-led and authentic. So this week, I'd love to start with a really important topic, which is feminism and what it means to be self-led and self-sufficient as a woman nowadays. Because being a woman nowadays is really not easy, especially compared to what it's like decades ago. Of course, decades ago, women had other challenges, but because we are really in the beginning of this huge change for us, because of feminism, we are really the first generations to learn how to navigate with these changes. And I have to say that I am really grateful for feminism, because we have to understand that until decades ago, for example, here in Portugal, which is where I'm living, it was until decades ago that women can really have their own bank account and have the work that they want, have the career that they want, without having, for example, a father or a spouse to give the permission, or even to travel without anyone else's permission. So feminism really allows women nowadays to have this freedom of choice. And this is so important because by allowing women to have this freedom and self-sufficiency, we don't have to be dependent on anyone else. If we want to have the career of our dreams, we can pursue what really fulfills our heart. And if we also want to be a stay-at-home wife or mother, we also have this freedom of choice. So sometimes I hear about, but if women, we already have this freedom, why should we be a stay-at-home mother, stay-at-home wife? So personally, I believe that women should have really their choice, because being a stay-at-home wife or mother is still really beautiful and honorable as well. It is a completely valid option. I would just say that in this case, it's still important for a woman to have a level of self-sufficiency, even if she stays at home. So, for example, she can have her own savings, her own investments, and have a level of financial literacy. And this is important because when a woman has a level of self-sufficiency and it's not completely dependent on someone else, well, first, if anything happens to her partner, she can still takes over and takes the lead and takes care of the family and herself. And also another important thing is that when a woman still has her own independence, she can also choose to leave in case the relationship is no longer aligned, or if there is even extreme cases such as abuse involved. So women really don't have to be stuck in any place, because if she can have self-sufficiency and freedom, then she can choose how to live her life. With all this said, it is not always easy to navigate the modern days as a woman, because again, we are the first generations to have this change. And yet there are many things that in our reality that still is catching up. For example, recently I've been in an event that was talking about menstruation. And before this event, I actually thought that, okay, I probably know most of what could be talked about. But maybe, just maybe, I will remain open minded and see what I could still learn from it. And after attending, I actually learned new things that I didn't realize. You see, we women, we are not really wired to live our lives in a 24 hours cycle. Our biology fluctuates during a monthly cycle. So our energy levels and our needs are different throughout the month, throughout each week of this monthly cycle. But how workplaces are structured, how work is structured, is very focused on the productivity around the 24-hour cycle. So when we learn about our cycles as women, we can actually improve our creativity and bring in more value even to our work, but in a different way. But it makes it harder when there is still a kind of stigma or weirdness around these kind of topics. And for example, as a woman and a mother, I went through pregnancy and maternity leave and then coming back from maternity leave to work. And there were a series of challenges a woman usually faces when she goes through all these phases. But then, because there is lack of sharing, usually, especially in the workplace, about these kind of topics, because you have to understand that many women they are afraid of sharing this because they are afraid of being perceived as weaker or as less capable than other coworkers if they share about what they might need to continue with breastfeeding, to take care of their kids, etc. And they want to portray themselves as strong and capable so that they deserve to stay in the jobs that they have. And that was how I felt when I came back from maternity leave. I struggled with the logistics, for example, to continue with breastfeeding, to pump milk at workplace. And I was feeling really this insecurity of, oh, I need to prove myself to myself and to others that I am still this capable professional woman. And I wasn't really the only one because when I talked to a few other coworkers who already had kids that were more grown up, they were sharing very vulnerable moments of how they felt this stress, so much that even affected their breastfeeding. Because when a woman is stressed, our body produces cortisol, and that actually interferes with the production of milk. And then during that event about menstruation, there was a talk that talked about menopause. And when women they go through menopause, they go through certain challenges physically that would require a little bit more understanding, some accommodation and flexibility. So when I went to this event and heard about this, about the challenges in menstruation and menopause that many women faces, it really reminded me, wow, how we still have a lot of work to do to have these changes in society, at work, etc. And you see, women having these challenges doesn't mean that we are more limited because we bring in different gifts also. For example, I worked with many female managers in the past and I work in IT. And I can tell you that they are really capable professionals that are both really good at organizing and making things happen within the projects and leading the team, because they also bring in this human touch, their capacity for emotional attunement and empathy. They make the environment of the teams much better also. And they also motivate teams better. So I do believe that it is really important to honor the differences between men and women, how our needs might differ, and how to accommodate everyone's needs so that we can empower our society as a whole. And it is so important to understand this. For example, healthcare has always been more focused on researches on men's health. But it is only more recently that we discovered, for example, the signs of heart attack is different between men and women. And another example is the cold plunges. You know, those cold baths that I would never really want to try personally because I personally love warm, hot baths. But even with cold plunges and temperature differences affect a woman's and a man's body differently. So we have different biological needs, and at the same time, we also have been shaped by different social conditionings throughout human evolution as men and women. And I'll give you an example. Just last month, during a coaching session, I actually discovered that I was carrying a story of my female ancestors that wasn't really even mine. And that is the fear of being confined in reality, in a relationship, if I don't have enough self sufficiency. And in my situation, I really don't really have the logical reason to be afraid of this because I'm blessed really with higher education and a career and the capacity to live my own life. But then in that coaching session, I really realized how much this story from my feminine lineage actually passed to me without I even fully consciously aware about it. But I witnessed it as I grew up, how there were women in my family that has been stuck in a marriage, for example, that is not really aligned, but because they were financially codependent on their spouses, they couldn't really live and choose how to live their lives in the way that fulfills them. And you know, I'm probably the first woman able to break out of this pattern because I was able to choose to divorce when the marriage that I had before wasn't really aligned anymore. And me and my ex husband, we loved each other, but we just couldn't really make it work. And instead of me being stuck in a marriage that really doesn't fulfill me, and it's really that we are just not aligned with each other anymore. But I could break away from it, especially because I have a higher education and a career and financial capacity to have this option to choose a different life. And this is so important because many women they are stuck even in situations involving abuse and they want to, for example, not even just protecting themselves but protecting their own children, but they can't because they don't have this capacity to be self-sufficient. But you know, this coaching session that I had, I really realized that how this story, this narrative was stuck in me and was really limiting me in how I live my life. And so many women, they have these inner narratives shaped by family, shaped by society, shaped by their environment. And men and women, we have different sets of narratives that we have to navigate through and break free from. So when we acknowledge these differences, these challenges that men and women face, and how we can bridge the gap, then together we can co-create a better structure that works for both. And really, the more women are aware of their specific needs, challenges, and gifts, the better we are at leveraging with this. So, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode, this talk, because next week I am going to dive deeper about empowering women financially. Like, why is it that it is so important? Why financial power matters for women? So, if you are curious about this, stay tuned for the next week's episode.